to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to start with our event here, and I think it would be very interesting. So anybody who is interested there in the backside is invited to come here to the panel. And we will have 1 hour for a very interesting discussion. And we have a very interesting guest. So we're looking back to last year in Dubai, and we had 4 goals. I will mention 4 goals: double efficiency, triple renewable, transition away from fossil fuels, and I will also name the methane pledge, because methane is responsible for 30% of global warming. And we have a lot of good efforts in the last year, but we are still far from 1.5 if we see the actual NDCs. So in the moment are all countries all over the world working on the NDCs, and they have to bring them until February of 25. And we hope that all NDCs together will bring us to 1.5. And we will discuss what we have to do to reach this and what we have to have in the NDCs. And we, if we're looking back, we have reached a positive tipping point in recent years. None of the leading industrial nations can afford to go back to a fossil fuel world. Doing nothing is much more expensive than doing the right things and planning and investment in the right solutions. And when we see what solutions technically we have a lot of solutions we can implement for about for less than 20 euro per emission of CO2. We had a lot of technologies that brings us electricity much cheaper than 20 years ago. When we're looking at the world, 85% of new power plants are renewable power plants. When we're looking to the implemented investment in 2023, 560 gigawatt new renewable power plants all over the world. But 60% in China and 1 to 2% in Africa. So it's a big challenge to have it all over in the world. And even if we're looking for jobs, we're seeing that the production of sustainable investment in industry and electricity and sustainable solutions brings a lot of jobs. Some we think about might be about 16 million jobs globally in renewable alone, and that's also a very important point. So that's the situation, and I will invite my guests here on the panel to come up, and we will have one guest, one panelist from Germany on the screen, but I would like to have Mrs. Espinosa, Patricia Espinosa, and Mr. Lauber and Mr. Erdem Aksakal to come to the panel. We will have a discussion here on the panel, and later on we also ask you for questions to our panelists. We have first on my right side Patricia Espinosa. She was responsible for the UNFCCC General Secretariat shortly after the Paris conference, and also in the time when the last Trump administration tried to get out of the climate agreement of Paris. And I would start with you and the question, Patricia, what do you think? We have a long way of efforts, but we are not fast enough, and even important is, I think, the social aspect and what you think what we have to do to reach the Paris goal, the 1.5 in the next in the new NDCs.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me in this panel. Thank you also. I really love to be here in the German Pavilion, Germany, a country where I spent almost 10 years just before I recently moved to Madrid. So a country that is so close to my heart. Thank you for the invitation. A country also where I have seen so many developments in the area of sustainability, and that I definitely admire for its leadership in so many aspects. Now, going to the question. First of all, I think it's very important that we do acknowledge the fact that we are not where we need to be, that we are making progress, definitely, and I think this is also important to underline. It is not a situation where I would say we should despair. Yes, it is a situation that demands urgency and a situation that demands determination and leadership, but it is also a situation when we think back, just even in 2015, you know, when Paris was adopted, I don't think anybody there was thinking that by today, 10 years later, we would have these prices for renewable energy. I don't think at that time, I remember at that time, people were still so skeptical about, no, solar, yes, maybe, yes, but you know, that's not going to be useful for the industry, that's not going to be useful for this or that. So I think we really have to look very closely at the developments and get inspired by that. Now, what do we need to have? First of all, I do think it's important also to recognize that we do have a very good, solid framework that establishes a good roadmap for the world in order to move on towards sustainability. And that's the Paris Agreement. That's, of course, on the basis of the convention. Now, the Paris Agreement and the negotiations have really been building over the last years all these mechanisms, all these general guidelines that should allow countries, governments at different levels, but also companies, civil society, everyone, to really guide the actions. It is at the same time, now we are in the moment where the big challenge is translating those frameworks into actions. And that happens at the national level. That happens in the businesses, in the countries, in the communities. That cannot happen here in the conference. Yes, of course, the conference can always provide additional guidance, can always come up with some additional instruments that can be helpful for governments and for businesses also to accelerate their actions. But it is really up to the countries at national level, at subnational level, at the level of each and every company to implement those actions.
Thank you very much for your first keynote. And second, I would like to ask Mr. Bischof-Niemz. He is on the screen and from Mecklenburg-Vorpommern in Germany. where his company ENERTRAG has is situated. And he's expert for implementation of wind energy, photovoltaic, and also electrolyzers. And the company is working in European countries, but also in a lot of in different African countries. So he's experienced in both continents. And I would like, Mr. Dr. Bischof-Niemz, what do you think what's in the electricity sector? What would we need to implement renewables in a faster scale, and what is necessary even for African countries where we see less investment than we need and than we wanted to see?
Yes, happy to talk about that. And first, apologies that I cannot be there in person. Would be great to be with you, but it's good that I can participate virtually at least. So as you mentioned, ENERTRAG, we are a renewable energy producer. We develop, build, own and operate renewable energy plants that produce reliable electricity and hydrogen from wind and sun. In the African continent that you mentioned, we are also developing one of the largest green ammonia projects globally. That's in Namibia, the Hyphen project. That's 2 million tons of ammonia production in the end state, 13 billion euros of total investment, and 7 gigawatt of renewables. So there we see very clear what we need in order to be able to actually deploy this capital into a project like this. And what was mentioned before, the goal of tripling global renewable capacity, is a very ambitious goal, but yet an achievable one. What we believe is crucially important is that we provide certainty around the investment into the renewable capacity. That can come through an indirect certainty via the hydrogen vector, as we see in a project like Hyphen in Namibia. If the net importer regions of the world, namely Europe, South Korea, Japan, if they provide offtake certainty around this new energy carrier, green hydrogen and its derivatives, for ammonia, methanol, green steel, whatever the product may be, with that offtake certainty comes bankability, investability in newcomer supplier countries like Namibia. The same principle applies for many, many new supplier countries that suddenly take part in the global energy flows that didn't take part before. So on the back of green hydrogen, bankability can be brought into new countries. That's one way. The other way, for countries that do not have the opportunity to export green hydrogen products, but that nevertheless want to transform their own electricity sector, we still need bankability for electricity in those countries. The main disadvantage of renewables, shall I say, is also their advantage. They are very capital intensive. They have no fuel cost. They consist basically purely of capex, capital expenditure and fixed cost, which means cost of financing is a very crucial aspect to make renewables work. So what we believe, what we need to bring public and private sector together is that the main objective must be to increase bankability of projects as much as possible. And how do we measure bankability in the level and the amount of non-recourse project finance that can be made available for energy infrastructure projects, combined with the interest rate. So at the end of the day, we must create projects that will attract low risk, low return capital from pension funds, from insurances, because that's the type of capital that we need in very large quantities to actually be able to stem this transition of the global green energy infrastructure. So what the public sector can do to achieve that, to attract this low risk, low return capital into this infrastructure is a public infrastructure to enable these new energy flows. That means energy export, energy import terminals, be that on ammonia side or on green hydrogen side, green hydrogen pipelines, electric grid. We also need blending requirements, or what government can do are blending requirements for very specific targets like for green hydrogen in the chemical industry, for green fertilizer, for green steel, for e-fuels into aviation, what we have in Europe already, and that drives a lot of market dynamics, that we have a very specific e-fuel target in aviation. We might want to have an e-fuel target in shipping as well. That would be interesting to hear from the next speaker, because that would drive much more e-fuel activity into shipping as well. That's the blending requirements. Thirdly, what governments can do apart from infrastructure and blending requirements is certainty around offtake. So governments can give fiscal forward guidance to say, this is the direction, this is where we want to go, and the product that you will produce will have an offtake. Whether that offtake is in Europe or whether we guarantee that your electricity that you produce in Ghana, for argument's sake, will have a business case over the next 20 years. So the tool of choice in that aspect in Europe at the moment is the CFDs, the contracts for differences. We believe that a global CFD could also be designed that brings bankability into global projects, electricity sector projects, and green hydrogen projects alike. And it's at the end of the day, it's a very efficient tool in the sense that it leverages public sector money quite a lot and brings multiple of private sector investment through increased certainty from every euro that is spent from the public sector. And with that statement, I'll thank you and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bischof-Niemz from ENERTRAG. And third keynote, I would like to ask Mr. Uwe Lauber. He is CEO from MAN Energy Solutions. MAN Energy Solutions is a company from Bavaria, and is the biggest ship motor company, and mostly build very heavy ones for very huge ships. And you are experienced also in new derivatives and new fuel options with derivatives from hydrogen. So my question is, what do you think, what must we do to accelerate the modernization of the shipping motors and the shipping industry and the maritime sector in the next decade, and what kind of regulation we need, because we have a very international field, and because every ship's connecting two countries from all over the world.
Well, thank you for this valid question. Yes, 80% of the global trade is being made by ships using our engines. That means, of course, a lot of emissions are being made with these engines, around about 3% overall, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit lower. It's not the highest in terms of pollution. It's similar to the car industry. But having said that, doing nothing is not a solution. Going all electric for these big beasts operating on the sea is also not a solution. Where electrification goes in and is useful, we should do that. There's no other way. But here, for the ocean lining vessels, the only way to reduce CO2 emissions or emissions in general is via decarbonization of the fuel. And like my colleague before has said, there are different options. So the world is getting more and more complex, so to say. Yeah? So synthetic fuels are the ultimate option. And the problem on the synthetic fuels like ammonia, methanol, or even synthetic methane, is we need hydrogen. We need hydrogen in volumes. They are tremendously high. The shipping industry needs around about 300 million tons of heavy fuel oil today. If we, and this is the task of the industry sector, we have to replace them gradually to alternative fuels in order to go down with the emissions. That means we need to produce only for the shipping industry 120 million tons of hydrogen. This is similar to the aviation sector, so just keep these values in mind because they are most likely the same. 120 million tons of hydrogen, tremendously high. What we forget most of the time, look at the chemical formula of these e-fuels. Most of the time you need CO2, whether it's synthetic methane or methanol. So converting 300 million tons of heavy fuel oil to methanol means 120 million tons of hydrogen, but 800 tons of CO2. And here the biggest question is also, I mean, we win this battle only if we do both. We need hydrogen and we need CO2, whether we like it or not. For the e-fuels, it's gonna be a product. And this is where the story starts. I mean, using electrolyzers, building up renewable energy sources, wind farms, solar farms in the part of the world where sun is there, I think the technology is given. But where do we get CO2 from? That's the main question. So CO2 most likely should come in the best way from biogenic origin, or should come from the air, direct air capturing. But the technology is not ready. So what we need to do is we need to build up a kind of a CO2 circular economy. That's fundamental. And that helps also the industry sector, which are hard to abate. Let's take the example of the cement industry. Yeah? Cement industry is responsible for 8% of the global CO2 emission. Most likely, not a lot of people know that, but 8% compared to the whole shipping industry, 3%. So that's quite a lot. Do we as a society, are we of the opinion we don't need cement? No, we need it. I don't want to go back to live in wooden houses. We need cement to build up our houses as well. But we need to give also this industry a vision, a future that they can produce also in areas like Germany or Europe. So letting out the CO2 to the air is also not the topic. So let's take it out with carbon capture and storage, or this time carbon capture and utilization. And this is definitely needed. So we need to push carbon management, and we need to push the hydrogen production in order to form these alternative fuels. You have also mentioned ammonia. Ammonia is toxic, and for the shipping industry, it is the ultimate goal to use it on large cargo vessels. Large cargo vessels with approximately 24,000 toys, containers on it. These are the most efficient way to transport goods from A to B, let's say from Asia to Europe or the United States. It's so efficient. A ship is in operation with around about 25 people. I'm underlining that once again. We need these vessels in order to global trade. On the other side, emission reduction with these new type of fuels is really a challenge. Today, I clearly can state technology from our perspective as an engine supplier. We are ready. Since more than 5 years, methanol-capable engines are ready to sell. They are there, they are reliable, there's no way. While speaking, an ammonia engine is on our test facility in Japan and starting to run on ammonia. So technology is also there, and the demand from ship owners, they are ordering already. 200 methanol engines are in our order book, and 80 ammonia engines are in our order book. But what is missing is really the fuel. I was together with Maersk because Maersk are the leading company in the industry to push also decarbonization in the maritime business. At the time when they ordered 20 vessels equipped with methanol engines from us, that was a breakthrough in the industry. I still remember the time because that was the best day in my life, or week I would say, because I got so many calls from other competitors to Maersk asking me, can I get another engine from you as well? Can you deliver? I answered everything, of course we can deliver, but then the question starts up, where by the way, do I get this green methanol? And right now, I'm sitting here, and Maersk knows it as well, it's not available. It's not available. The ramp up of hydrogen and the CO2, these are the main topics which we need to address as a society. And again, don't forget, CO2 is not the devil in this room, it's also going to be a product. So we need also CO2 in order to build up these so-called e-fuels.
Yes, everybody has an own micro. So, thank you very much, Mr. Lauber. And now I would like to ask our fourth panelist, Mr. Erdem Aksakal is responsible for sustainable marketing at SAP, German IT expert, and is a company which is experienced all over the world, I think.
That's correct.
In a lot of different networks. And I would like to ask, we read a lot in the last months about the electricity demand of artificial intelligence, and some companies think they only can use nuclear to come up with it. What do you think about the electricity needs of artificial intelligence? And I'm very I hope to get some information from you about this field.
Thank you very much for this organization and the invite as well. For the ones who may not be familiar to SAP, SAP is a technology, cloud and business solutions company which helps hundreds of thousands of businesses all over the world to be more efficient, to be more profitable, to be more agile. And we are lucky that we had experienced this digitization journey in other domains as well. For instance, when the IFRS or the other accounting regulations came, we helped hundreds, thousands of customers to convert their business towards the regulation in the accounting and financial domain. Now it's the sustainability era, and we need to help our customers to be compliant into the regulation. However, it's not, innovation usually lies much ahead than the regulation. So if we want to innovate, if we want to convert our core businesses into more sustainable practices, then we need to innovate altogether. Before jumping into the conversation about the artificial intelligence, maybe I want to give a few insights about what are the core reasons of why we are concerned about the global warming is we don't have entire data transparency. We are complaining about the outcomes of the carbon waste or other water-related environmental problems, but usually we do report them in the high levels. But to solve a problem, we need to report and record at the most possible granular level, if possible at the product level, if possible at the component level. I appreciate how Ms. Espinosa mentioned that we need to solve these problems in our businesses, in our countries, during our core businesses, and then we can come together and change best practices. Coming to the conversation about artificial intelligence, like many technological upstreams, is an amazing tool that we can build a lot of solutions on top of it. Like many technologies, it definitely comes with a cost, and in this cost could be investment cost, some environmental cost, and even some job costs. We are somehow concerned, are we going to lose our jobs to the AIs and robots? Coming to the environmental footprint of artificial intelligence, research shows that even on the route optimization of the airplane or the traffic optimization in the trains or cars, artificial intelligence can already break out its footprint with some solutions. If we can build artificial intelligence for beneficial solutions for society, for business, for governments, then we won't be concerned about the outcomes. When it comes to the social practices, I totally agree that sustainability should have a kind of holistic view of social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and financial sustainability. If we manage to approach the problems waste problem, CO2 problem, and also social problems holistically, then we can sort it out easier. The tools that I can suggest is the data transparency, collaboration before competition, and also practicing ethical businesses. 75% of the CO2 emissions are happening in the corporate supply chains, which big corporations don't have the entire control or even visibility. And almost the same number of unethical businesses, again, happening in unsustainable supply chain, meaning that if we are doing some business with some non-sustainable business practices, when you scratch them, you will see also unethical business practices as well. So our solution for businesses is data transparency, collaboration, and positioning collaboration even before competition. Usually companies are trying to be profitable first and afterwards sustainable. But what we suggest and what we experience is we can be and we are profitable and sustainable at the same time.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Three very different branches of our industry and an outlook to the situation. And I would like to ask you all for a second question. I would like to answer very shortly, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and then so that we can ask our visitors also for some questions. And Patricia, I see the International Energy Agency says efficiency first. When we hear this vast amount of hydrogen, we talk about artificial intelligence and stuff. We see we need efficiency. Dubai said double efficiency. And on the other hand, we need finance for all this investment. What do you think about how we can bring this together?
Well, definitely we need both, right? We need efficiency. We need also the finance, and I think that it's important to start with the plans, the national plans, the regional plans, the corporate plans. Have to have clarity on what are the goals, what is the timeline, what are the milestones that we need to achieve in that journey. I think that is. It sounds like of course we need a plan, but in many parts of the world, to put together a plan, a transition plan that is economy-wide, that covers all different gases, is not something that is easy. So in that regard, we need to provide the support to those countries. And then for implementation, you were mentioning that, for example, in terms of renewable energy, what is currently being deployed globally, most of it is located in China. Very little of it is located, is dedicated to Africa, for example. And the case of Latin America is also similar, maybe not as low as Africa, but still. Asia, I would say the same. Asia, we are seeing in many countries in Asia still coal-fired power plants, and that is something that needs to go. So what do we need? On the one side, the plans. On the side of the governments, the legal frameworks, the regulatory frameworks, the incentives that will allow the financial resources to flow, that will allow also businesses to take the necessary steps in order to start exploring this new market, the new market that represents the green economy, and take those opportunities. So I would say it should be seen like an opportunity by businesses, but also by governments. And there is a need to have businesses and governments working closer together. For some countries in the south that have a very high level of risks and where finance is extremely expensive, I think this is why the negotiation that is taking place currently here in Baku is so relevant, right, on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance, because it means some resources need to be put there on the table so that the investments and the decisions to deploy these technologies massively in those countries that are huge markets and that will continue to grow because of their demographics, and where therefore emissions will continue to grow. For those countries, it is important to put money together so that investments can be de-risked. And there is an additional support in order to create these opportunities. I personally think that these opportunities are still undervalued in many cases. If we look at the fact of, for example, we have still over 600 million people around the world without access to electricity. You know, today in the 21st century, that is really not acceptable, and I think we can make it happen. We are seeing that we have the technological solutions. There are the commitments, so we really need to get everybody that needs to be there around the table and get it done.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bischof-Niemz, we see, if we think about regulation and efficiency in grids and storage, for example, we have a pledge here on the COP to strengthen grid and storage worldwide. We see efficiency when we change from a combustion car to an electric vehicle. We save 75% of the primary energy. If we go from an oil heating to a heat pump, we also save more than 75% of the primary energy. Where do you see efficiency potential in the grid or in the management of the grid and the integration of flexibility?
I think in terms of the technical efficiencies that you mentioned, that they are mostly related to fuel switch. So by us switching to electrification, we basically are reducing our primary energy demand tremendously by roughly 50%, because we don't have we don't have that much waste in form of excess heat in power plants and so on anymore. On the, I think that one efficiency that we need to unlock is more a regulatory / embracing efficiency, I would call it, because we see in many markets, as we also just heard, that the large part of the 0.5 terawatt of new renewables that we are deploying at the moment is deployed in a small number of countries. And we need to get into a situation where we are deploying renewables broad-based across every country. In most countries where we are active in, established renewables markets and newest renewables markets, the enabling environment to get grid access, to tune the grid from fossil-based grid operations to a renewables-based grid operation does not exist yet. And that's why grid, in many jurisdictions, grid access is the new bottleneck. In most cases, it's not a technical bottleneck, really, if you look into the root cause. It's more a bottleneck of the grid operator, the TSO, not being willing or able yet to operate the existing grid in a renewables enabling fashion. And that's where we need to unlock a lot of potential. When it comes to the technical operation of the grid in grids that have more renewables already, let's say in the European market, that's where we see the production of hydrogen again as one factor to utilize the electric grid more efficiently and better. Because if you co-locate wind and solar and hydrogen production, you produce electricity and hydrogen in the same location, and by doing that, you're basically taking the electrons that are useful in the electricity grid, and you feed them into the electricity grid, and the electrons that are not useful in the electricity grid because you have too much wind, too much sun, you convert them into a different energy carrier, into hydrogen. And as a result, the utilization of the existing electric grid will increase tremendously. To give you a concrete example, at our largest renewable power station in Germany, in the Uckermark, we have 1 gigawatt of renewable capacity installed, up and running, and we have a grid connection of 1 gigawatt today. In the next 10 years, we will now add more renewables to that same grid connection, but we will add electrolyzer to the same grid connection as well. And by doing that, we don't need more grid connection. We will effectively utilize the existing grid connection 3 times better than we are today, because we co-locate hydrogen production together with the renewable resource, balancing the system directly at the source of production.
Thank you very much. So big amount of efficiency we could get if we have a good organization of the grid. I heard from you, Mr. Lauber. You talked about 3% emissions of shipping industry. There are other sources discussing 5 or 6%. What it's exactly, that is one question. And then we have about, in the moment, we need 40% of the shipping sector to transport fossil fuels. Does we need them even in the future, when we can get the future fuels all over the world? And how is the efficiency potential of digitalization in the shipping sector?
So there were many questions at the same time. Let's start with the first one. 3% is the average value of the CO2 emission coming from the maritime industry. So future fuels, I mean, we need future fuels. The question is, where can we produce them in the quantity we really need? And here, my colleague said it correctly, all starts with hydrogen. And hydrogen production is predominantly made in the areas where we have a lot of sun and wind. Not only, I say mainly. So countries like Australia, Chile, or Middle East, the Sun Belt, there you can produce massive electricity from renewable. So there you have hydrogen. Then the question is, where is the demand? And that's most likely not in the desert, that's for sure. So we need to transport hydrogen in a form where it economically makes sense. And that means we need to have a carrier. I strongly believe that transporting hydrogen in liquid form doesn't make any sense. You need minus 152 degrees C. There's a massive waste of energy to keep it cool like that. To compress it up to 600 bar would be also an option, but also there, I mean, the volume is not there. So we need to convert it to ammonia, for instance. So here we go again. Ammonia is going to be a future fuel for the shipping industry, which means, of course, we will replace fossil fuel. And whether we like it or not, also in the future, for other areas, we need oil. We still need oil. So I don't see that the transportation will go down on these different fuel types. The mix is going to change. That is quite clear. But like I said before, ammonia or methanol will not be produced in the center of Germany or Europe. I strongly believe this is going to happen in the areas where we have a lot of renewable energy sources, where we have massive overcapacity or can be built up. Not predominantly, don't get me wrong, but we in Europe or we in Germany gonna be an importer of these fuels as well, as they will be produced somewhere else.
Thank you very much. And I would come again to Mr. Aksakal. Your company also working on accounting system to integrate accounting system in the IT infrastructure of small and medium and big companies. What do you think it's possible to integrate, for example, the scope 1, 2 and 3 system in our international accounting system, so that a bank at the first view on the account can see, oh, this company has a very bad scope 3, so we have to charge a much higher interest rate, or maybe we give no new credit if they can't bring down their scope 3. Do you think that's an option to integrate the data system from the counting system in directly for the use, for example, on a New York Stock Exchange, to see at the first view, oh, this company is not on track with 2.C of the Paris Agreement?
I mean, regardless of the regulations, I think all the businesses should treat carbon like money. Carbon is something that we need to keep the track of with all levels of business. Could be during manufacturing, our own carbon footprint, logistics, or even supply chain. Business urge us to do this because if you are not sustainable, if you are not under the control of your carbon, the first penalty comes from the consumers. Consumers will not be preferring you. You see there is a kind of increasing sensitivity for the sustainable and ethical practices. So Gen Z consumers are already preferring sustainable brands. Second, globally, there are already 2,000 regulations here and there. It's whether CSRD, EUDR, ESRS, I can count many of them. But at the end of the day, if you are doing a global business, you need to comply all these regulations. And then here comes the data transparency and embedding technology in your daily practices to treat carbon like money. We already have our accounting system which keeps the track of every penny in and out into our balances. Now it's time to make it for carbon as well. It's time to make it for waste as well. And we already do with a lot of our customers. They are tracking not at scope 1, 2, 3 level, at the product level, even at the component level, they can keep the track of their carbon footprint, water footprint, or waste footprint. So that makes perfect sense to integrate it, and then it's up to the governments and regulators whether to keep it as a regulatory force or give it to the free market.
Very interesting, and so on one hand, we see a lot of energy we need in the future and new fuels. On the other hand, we see a lot of efficiency options too. I would like to give the chance to our visitors to ask maybe a question to our experts. Would like anybody to ask a question here? I give you mine maybe. Oh, you have one?
Hello, my name is Christian Jensen. I'm CEO of Green Power Denmark, a business organization for renewable energy. I just want to start out saying that we are in 6 years, we will produce more electricity from renewable energy than we consume, even with an increase in electrification in Denmark. So we're ready to provide some of it to Germany. The question is to the shipping industry, because you mentioned Maersk, who started a wave of e-methanol, but you're beginning now with ammonia. Where will the future go for shipping? Will that go for ammonia because you have the abundance of nitrogen in the air and there will be a shortage of CO2 coming from biogen sources.
Thank you. Maybe let me collect two more questions so we can ask maybe one more or two more. Are there anybody who like to ask a question? Now's the chance, just now. Okay, so we start with this question. Mr. Lauber.
So thank you for the question. I mean, if I would have the right crystal ball, I would be more than happy. The future for our customers like Maersk, is getting more complex. The time is over that we're going to use a single fuel like we did in the past, diesel. That is definitely over. So what kind of fuels it's going to be, it really depends on the sector you're going to serve. So for the shipping industry, let's say large container vessels transporting equipment or goods from A to B, it's more likely that at the end, in 2030 plus, they're going to switch over to ammonia. For passenger vessel, it's more unlikely that we ever, I mean, I should not say it, I'm a technician, maybe the society like we here are more reluctant in 10 years from now to go on a cruise vessel being equipped with an ammonia engine. I have my doubt, because ammonia is toxic. There, most likely it's going to be methanol. I would also underline the fact, and just coming last week from a business trip in the United States, I had the chance to talk to customers like Carnival, like RCCL, Disney, all these nice shipbuilders which you might see going into the harbor. And there is again a discussion popping up using LNG or synthetic methane as a bridge fuel for the future when they really know. I know that LNG has a certain problem once it comes to greenhouse gas effect, unburned hydrocarbons. From a technical perspective, this can be avoided, there's no doubt. So to answer, it's not one single fuel. It depends on the application, which way to go, and of course, it's going to be a multi-fuel capability in the future. So I would say it's LNG or synthetic methane, it's e-methanol or e-ammonia.
Thank you very much. I didn't saw another question, so I would, now. Elena, kannst du noch mal rechts hinter dir das Mikrofon direkt dem Herrn geben? Und dann hier vorne in der letzten Reihe auf rechten Seite. So,
thank you. Roland here from Rosa Luxemburg. I want to ask, with the push for hydrogen and so on, there is a lot of countries that are positioning themselves to export this to Germany and to other countries. Now, what is the environment like, the policy environment, given that obviously, like you're saying, it is not going to happen as quickly as possible, as we need, rather. And the second question, we are still going to use some oil. So the question is, how much of it, what are your projections, and what kind of policy environment is going to allow for this? Because we see that there is already a lot of negativity in that space.
Thank you. My name is Urs Ruth. I'm from Bosch Corporate Research, and I have a question to the gentleman in the video chat for his project with the electrolyzers connected to the wind generation in the Uckermark, where he uses the electrolyzer only at times when the grid is congested. So this would bring about a low utilization rate of the electrolyzers, and I was wondering how high that was and what the levelized cost of producing the hydrogen then will be from your project. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And I don't want to give the question to only one person. I would like you four with the last word to say maybe with 2 or 3 sentences, what do you hope? What would be the hopefully outcome of this conference of the COP29 in Baku? And what is your wish, therefore? And who is able or who wants to answer to the 2 questions? He is free to answer the 2. So we start with Patricia Espinosa.
Thank you very much. So what is my hope for this conference? Of course, here the big issue in terms of the negotiations is the finance for, in order for us to be able to deploy these renewable energy technologies everywhere in the world. I think that's an opportunity for everybody. We need to find the right mechanisms, but it should be something that is doable. In terms of the climate action space, all of this space, my wish is that it really comes across as giving the message that the transformation, the transition to a more sustainable world, to a better planet, to a cleaner planet is possible and is already happening. And that this message really comes across to the general public, because here, when we are talking among us, sometimes all these messages don't really reach the general public. So that would be my wish. And just one question regarding the regulatory framework regarding the use of fossil fuels. Well, last year at COP28, there was an agreement to transition away from fossil fuels. Why? Because science has demonstrated that this is, in a great measure, fossil fuels have been responsible for the global warming. I think there is this common understanding. Now, how we translate that into specific regulations and guidelines at national level, that we still need to see. But it has to be in a way that is fair, that allows everybody to come along, that allows, for example, us as an international community to fulfill the goal of giving access to energy, electricity to everyone in the planet, which is not yet there. And also recognizing that, it is a transition period. It is not intended to become that from one day to the next we're going to completely change. But this is why the transition plans are so important at all levels. And I think what is relevant is that we do prepare ourselves for that change, and we can benefit from the transition as much as possible.
Thank you very much, Patricia Espinosa. And secondly, I would like to ask Mr. Erdem Aksakal for your wishes and maybe a short answer.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and changing this industrial exchange. I mean, for the future, whatever we are going to do should be data-driven, AI-enabled, and positioning data transparency and collaboration among institutions. We are here to collaborate and exchanging data, providing experiences, putting information and knowledge together on the same hubs, and building on this, on the AI-enabled future, then can make us into a more sustainability. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on these questions, so I will just leave it to Thank you very much.
That was great. Mr. Lauber, what's your wishes about the outcome?
Yeah, the wishes is that I think the society clearly understood there are many, many ways to decarbonize. Technology is ready or is on the way to be developed while I'm speaking. The challenge for me is there rather in the implementation, and this is also what we see today. We are by far too slow, and 10 years ago at the Paris Climate Conference we set us a goal. it's still valid, right? Where do we stand today? And looking backwards, so we need to accelerate the speed of the implementation. This is the most important point. Technology is there, supported by AI, fully understood. Efficiency measures can be implemented, but we need to walk the talk now. Financing is key. Business cases are needed to do that, because everybody is talking about decarbonization, but at the point in time when it comes who's going to pay for it, everybody wants to run away. There are certain areas where business cases are there, like the shipping industry. The costs of a T-shirt transported from A to B is 1 cent higher if you going to use green methanol. We simply can afford that, there's no doubt. We just have to do that, and we need to speed up. That is my highest wish here, because we all have children at home, hopefully, and they need to get a better world as well in order to live on this planet Earth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lauber. Last but not least, Tobias Bischof-Niemz, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. I'll quickly answer the question on the Uckermark. I guess I'm the only one who is able to respond to that one. So what we are planning there, that's typical for German electrolyzers. We don't have the perfect wind and solar resource as we have in other countries like Namibia, but we do have an advantage, which is that we have a very large electricity sector. So what that means is, if we build wind and solar in Germany, we can separate the electricity that is produced between 2/3 of the electricity that goes into the electricity sector, 1/3 goes into the electrolyzer hydrogen production. That 1/3 is basically the leftover that is not needed in the electricity sector, which means it's cheap. It's cheaper than the production cost, much cheaper. We're talking 1 cent, 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So that effect of cheap electricity counters the effect of low utilization of the electrolyzer. And low meaning we will have 3,500 to 4,000 full load hours of the electrolyzer. But you need to see it as a balance between cheap electricity on the one hand, lower utilization on the other hand. It's an optimization. My wish for COP is that the targets that we have all set, and I can only emphasize the speed of implementation needs to increase. What I hope that we will have good decisions on the way to create tools of how we make this speed faster. How do we do that? How do we create investable business cases where people from the private sector are willing to deploy large amounts of money into this green energy infrastructure? And by doing that, we need to find ways and mechanisms to get the most bang for the public sector buck. Yeah? We don't have all the money in the public sector. We need to be smart about how we use the public sector and leverage public sector money to create investable business cases so that the private sector money can come in and make the bulk of the investment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bischof-Niemz. That was really interesting. It was, I write the most important points here, and it's very interesting to see what you mentioned. Transformation is possible and is always happening, says Patricia Espinosa. And you know what happens in Paris. It was kind of a masterpiece of diplomacy. That I always say, bring 197 people in a room and try to write together a 30 pages paper, and that was what happened there. And at the end, every country say, okay, this is our vision, this is our plan for the future, and now we're working on this to make it happen. And we see we have a lot of ideas here on the panel from efficiency to business cases, from finance and accounting systems to integrate, from transparency to reporting and regulation, and efficiency in the grid, efficiency on the sea, efficiency in the net, everywhere. So I hope you got some good ideas for your business, for your NGO, or for your government. Thank you very much for attending us.
Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.